Thank you, Waleed Khalid, for joining us here in this simple show. Uh, Waleed Khalid has devoted most of his time to teach English in Iraq and globally. So let's start with you first. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, for sure. So my name is Waleed. I think a lot of people actually know who I am
Already, yeah.
already. And just to give you a kind of snapshot about where I am coming from, because a lot of people actually see who you are, but they don't know where you're coming from, which is more significant. If you do so,
Mhm.
you would definitely kind of like carve your way throughout this kind of path in your life to become who you want to be based on who you are and also based on the kind of hurdles and obstacles and
Mhm.
predicaments that you've seen in my life. So I would always tell my friends that my personality is just a fraction of all the failures that I've accumulated
Mm.
over the past few years of my contact and exposure to English language. I started my journey with language when I was a kid.
Mm.
So I've been tutored by my uncle and my dad to learn the basic alphabet.
Mm.
And from there, it just opened a window for me to explore this world of language learning and language teaching. I cannot say that I started language teaching at early stage because I was novice at that time and
Mm.
I didn't have that much of accumulated experience.
Yeah.
However, my curiosity was pretty much the same cat that drove me to carry on, in my life and my career and seek out for things that got to do with language learning.
Mhm.
And after that, I started exploring the English literature that just drove me more to the passion of exploring the whole English literature and the American literature. And eventually, I ended up having a seat at the College of Languages at Baghdad University,
Mhm.
where it just
Just like
opened
me.
a bigger gate,
Yeah.
Um, I started in 2005, which was
Mm.
kind of like controversial year for us. It was in the middle between
Yeah. Civil war, like.
2003 and 2006.
No.
So this critical time in the history of Iraq
Mhm.
has witnessed, so many alternations and changes in
Yeah.
terms of the kind of quality of education that was provided at that time. Not to say that I'm underestimating the kind of education that we got,
It was
but
difficult.
I, I
Yeah.
got I got that kind of principled belief that if you want to develop yourself, you have to start from yourself.
Mm.
Do not blame anybody else.
Mhm.
If we blame anybody else, we're just creating an excuse,
Yes.
to defend who we are in terms
Yeah.
of like our failures or our successes. So I started building myself. I had so many recurring visits to Mutanabbi.
Mhm.
I developed a very small circle of friends who just supported me, backed me up, and
So
also
sorry
gave
for
me
interrupting you. Do you mean that college wasn't enough for you in terms of English?
it. It is not that I want to say it was
Mm.
not enough per se, but the kind of
It was like
education
something complimentary for going to Mutanabi and these things.
that echoes in my mind the quote by Albert Einstein that says, "Do not let schooling interfere with your
Mm.
education."
No.
Now, when we come to the principle of education, we need to define it quite clearly in order to understand what it is and how we can perceive it, approach it, and then deal with it. Now, the kind of treatment of education at the time was not up to the level of my expectations. And let
Mm.
me tell you a funny story since we have this beautiful conversation.
Okay.
When I was back in elementary school, I used
Mm.
to steal from the bookstore the books of the next stage because there were not enough books.
Okay.
I was at the second and third year in
Mm.
my elementary school, and the kind of book demand was really high.
Mm.
And I had that kind of insatiable need to read more. Just once we start the first week of the classes and the first month, I finish
Mm-hmm.
all the book and I memorize everything in the books. So in my second and third year, we did not have official English tutoring at school. It starts at year 5, but I was reading at year 3, you know. And I was asking them to give me the book just to have a look at it, and they said, "Well, we don't have enough copies of that book." So I make my way to the bookstore, to the school library, and I kind of like talk with the school library owner, and then I leave the window of the school, the library door open. And
Come
then later on, I sneak back and I get a copy, but I return it. I just read it. I just need to know what is going on. That kind of like photos and pictures that we're using at these kind of books were fascinating to me, and it just drove me crazy to explore it more and to find more about it. Now, going back, a few years forward. At the University of Languages, we had the kind of education that anybody was taking at that time. There's this controversy of whether this quality of education is not or bad, but I'm not going to comment on that because I think pretty much everybody knows that we were in very critical points in the history of the country, and the kind of selectivity of the materials were not based on a modern methodology, the contact with native speakers and the contact with foreign.
And they're still, I think.
Yes and no. Private schools, they've started to update that.
No, private is different,
but private schools are using more commercial books in the sense that they're just trying to automatize the kind of classes that the teachers are giving, so they're putting less responsibility on the teachers' shoulders, but that does not justify the fact that the kind of books that they use are not up to the level of expectations.
But better, I think.
always tell my friends, books and curriculum of English is like a kind of medicine that you obtain from the pharmacy. Now, you cannot prescribe the same medicine to every patient.
Of course,
Because everyone has his own needs, and based on the needs assessment,
that's why we need teachers.
Perfect. So based on the needs assessments of the students, based on the environment setting analysis, and based on the kind of objectives that you set for your curriculum holistically, and also based on the kind of objectives that you set for week and month and year, you're going to build a very solid kind of curriculum that fits the purpose. Now, since we are in EFL setting, and for the audience who do not know what EFL setting is, it's English as a foreign language setting, which is far more challenging than ESL setting, which is, for
second
audience
language.
who do not know what ESL is, it's English as a second language. Why? Because the responsibility of the EFL teacher is 10 times more challenging than the responsibility of an English teacher who's teaching in an English-speaking country. Everything is available. Like you can teach them a lesson about how to ask in a restaurant, and then you take them to a restaurant and having them pay the check for you. And we used to do that. But when it comes to Iraq, the kind of context that we are dealing with is pretty much using language to a minimal level. So there's not that kind of exposure, but mostly there is no kind of necessity that necessitates the need to second language. I was in Dubai and Qatar in last January, and I could see why people use English. Most of the facilities there, the government and private facilities, use foreign service workers, and they pretty much use only English unless you speak Bengali or Indian or Pakistani languages.
I think this is also, the same case when people finish their college and start working. They pretty much face the same thing. They need language and so on, and so they go back to learning the language again from zero.
Yes, that's definitely the case here in Iraq. But the kind of difference here in Iraq is that people in Iraq, which is something that's got not to do with language itself. Like when we ask the question, why do people not speak English in Iraq? There's cluster complicated kind of problem, and in order to tackle it, we need cluster complicated kind of solutions.
Yes.
So the kind of discussion that we have about this is like trying to analyze a formula for Albert Einstein and see how that is relative to the Iraqi context. It's actually entangling kind of predicament. And it is based on years and years and years of
and unfortunately increasing every day, new problems come to the floor.
Yes, that's definitely the case here. And the kind of intricacy that it's reaching out is excruciating to English teachers. Because we are dealing with complicated level generations who have accumulated this kind of perception that language is extricable from the society, and we can go on with our life without the use of language. Also, the institutionalized need of language. Now, let me tell you about the institutionalized needs of language. You do not need language until you get a job. And you can get a job without your having any kind of professional experience, because we have tribal alliances. We have nepotism. We have favoritism. We have
so language doesn't always matter.
Dollars to distribute to people who just who need that. We have a kind of like some other
thank you.
ways. So the idea of understanding language and dealing with language and using language in a proper way is confronting with the fact there are so more societal complications to it. Now we have to copy that and paste it on the plate of the higher education.
So sorry, talking about higher education, you have completed your MA in the United States, and now you are doing a PhD in Iraq, right?
That's correct.
So yes, can you tell us please the difference, the comparison, the way you see it?
No, I always tell my friends, and let me rewind a little bit here. I always tell my friend that the story of doing my master degree is a story of a flash drive. Why? There's this kind of analogy between a flash drive and completing my master degree. Once I was, well, let me tell you a little bit about how I got the scholarship, first of all. So all of that kind of rating and social contact that I had with friends of mine from different walks of life just led me to get some emails frequently from people who they know me and they know my dedication to English language and my interest in pursuing my higher graduate studies and postgraduate studies in a foreign country like Japan or Germany or UK and United States. So I was shooting for 4 scholarships. I was shooting for the scholarship in Japan. I was shooting for the scholarship of DAD in Germany. I was shooting for the scholarship of Chevening in British pronunciation. And I was shooting for the foreign language program in the United States, which is Fulbright.
Fulbright, yeah.
So I didn't get Fulbright the first trial or the first attempt, because I got 543 in the TOEFL. And the requirement was 550 at that time. That was back in 2008, 2009. Now, there was the opening of the Iraqi scholarship program, so I applied to that one, and they, happily speaking, wanted the top-ranking students, the top-ranking graduates from the bachelor degree program in Iraq. So I was a top third one. So I got admitted. Once I got in there, I started taking 1 year of ESL intensive English program, and then summer boot camp of English intensive program, and we continued that kind of training for 1 year before they push you to the graduate studies. And the graduate studies in the United States, we only were 12 students in our departments of teaching English as a second language. We are only 2 Iraqi students, one from Baghdad, which is me, and the other is from Mosul. And his name is Adnan Al-Hamoudi. I think you know him or not. He started.
I saw him on Facebook.
Yeah, so he's the second person. We were together. We were colleagues. And 10 American students. And oh boy, like when you start the graduate program in the United States, they do not let you just go kind of freely without giving the the expenses, which are getting intensive English training. So at that time the demand was to get very high standardized test score, IELTS or TOEFL, and we spent a year almost to prepare to get 110 out of 120 because that was the threshold to be admitted in the program. And we had so many attempts, to point to that level.
So if you failed at that point, you go back?
If you fail, they kick you out of the school and they let you go back. And now there's more complications than that because you've signed on the Iraqi part contract with the government to be committed for 3 years of intensive graduate courses. And then you have to go back and
serve
pay
your
the
country?
pay the music, serve double the amount of time. But that's administrational issues. Now let me talk about the educational issues and how English in the United States is different. One of the beautiful things about the school that we were situated in, it was an institute. It was not a school. Now the institutes in the United States are kind of more interesting than the institutes in Iraq, and I'm just going to scratch superficially the kind of difference in there because it runs deep. It is not as easy as something that we can finish the discussion about it in like an hour or two.
Okay.
Institutions in the United States or ma'ahid in the United States only provide MA and PhD. They do not provide diplomas.
Okay.
And in terms of institutions there are institutions in the sense, quote unquote, they are institutionalized to teach a major or 2 or 3. They are specialized. So if you hear
So they're under control, like by the government?
No, they're not. Most of them are private sector. But they are institutionalized in the sense that they are specialized in the provision of only 2 or 3 majors. So the demand and the nature of the study in there is very intensive. They provide you with 1 year of intensive English, academic English, how to develop your writing, how to develop your communication skills, how to develop your presentation skills. So most of the training there is empirical, not theoretical. They don't go about theories that much because they do believe that the best practice of theory is in practice. And
this
no
is what
matter
we need here, I think.
Theoretical part, there is this kind of venue to explore, which is the practical part. So most of the applications that we did in there were based on empirical experimentations. So we go out to high schools, we go out to primary schools, and like we study and analyze this theory or that theory, and then we go and apply it in the schools. We do not only study the theoretical part. Now, the counterpart education, and if you can.
This is the question. Is it the same?
The counterparts of education in Iraq, they rely heavily on the theoretical part because the parameters of analysis of empirical part, you want to test and attest a kind of theory, you need to develop a very high, solid operational parameters that can provide high levels of validity, reliability, and practicality, the measurements of the tool that you're using. Say, for example, a new method of language teaching. So if you propose this kind of methodology, it is going to be subject to the measurements or the way of scales that we have. Like when we say this method is better than the old classical lecturing kind of method that we have in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
but the problem, we face, I mean, you said about theories and these things, they know them. These PhD students, teachers, or professors, whatever we have here, they know all of them, I think. But the problem is that they don't put them in practice. Why is that?
Now, this is a very significant question, actually.
Is it about laziness, being lazy, or it's about facilities? And
it's actually a multifaceted kind of problem that when we talk about this case, there is lack of support from the department's administration. There is lack of support from the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Higher Education. One of the best aspects of English education in the United States and UK, that the Ministry of Higher Education and the Ministry of Education do not interfere in the business of schools. Mm-hmm. They have annual tests like SAT, for example, and these are official tests that the students can go and take, and that is going to give them higher credibility mm-hmm. of the result that they get if they do the right training. But the ministries do not interfere in the work of schools because every school is different. Mm. Every person is different. So the schools in the United States, the academic universities and colleges are institutionalized in the sense that there is administration committee of professors of every school and every university that determines the kind of syllabus that they want, the kind of materials that they need to train students on, the kind of standards that they have. And there is also the federal government committee mm-hmm. that supervises every school, private and public school in the United States, which is something that I need, to enlighten people about the difference. So every school has a kind of digital system of mm-hmm. Grades, and they push the grades to the federal government committee that supervises these grading, and anybody falls beyond or below this grading system, they're not going to be legible to be admitted at public school or public university. We use the word school loosely in the United States to mean university. Mm-hmm. So they talk about the word school to mean university and interchangeably university for school. Yeah. Now, what happens is that every college develops a very solid curriculum based on criteria that they demand from the students. Mm-hmm. Now, when every student is, for example, they go by the GPA, which is grade point average. Mm-hmm. Now, some of the universities demand that the minimal maintained grade point average should not fall below 3.5 out of 4, mm-hmm. which is almost 85%. Now, if you get a score under 85%, you are going to be dismissed out of the school. Oh. And in some cases,
so they go private?
Private and public, but it depends. We have a group of schools or universities in the United States that we call them the Ivy League universities. Mm-hmm. So the Ivy League universities are the champions, the best of the best, like MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Princeton, Stanford, Cambridge, Harvard. These are called the Ivy League universities, or Georgetown. They have very high standards in terms of admission and in terms of the attestation and in terms of the criteria of assessing the students and getting the best out of them. Yeah. Like, for example, Stanford University's annual admission is 3,000 students only. If we compare this amount of people to other universities, the annual admission goes beyond 60,000 thresholds. Yeah. Yeah. But those 3,000 are the best of the best of the best elites.
Yeah, selected, yeah.
Choose them carefully. So when we hear the term Stanford echoes in the around us, it just triggers this kind of fear of how solid and how good that university
Of course.
is.
Yeah.
Now, what that gave them, it gave them the privilege of understanding how the mechanism of students work, the behavior of students, and how they can develop that. Every school there has a psychological department or psychology department. So it's a psychology enhancement department to students who have kind of like melancholy, they have depression, they have drug addiction, they have alcohol addiction. They treat all of these as a sequential order for them to become better students. They have to go through that kind of conduit. In addition to that, there's writing center in every school.
So it's a city more than a university in this case.
It's actually what we call a metropolis, an educational metropolis, which is, we use the word metropolis like for San Francisco, for example, or New York, because they are so big to the point that the school itself probably will be having probably more than 100,000 students sometimes, like Michigan State University, like the State University of Michigan, Indiana State University, Ball State University, Baltimore State University, Washington State University. These are mega universities. They're educational metropolis, and they have hundreds of thousands of people studying and working in them.
Wonderful.
Now, they drive positively the American economy,
of course,
but not on the expense of graduating students who are half-baked.
This is the point.
They're not on the expense of graduating students half-baked. No, they bake their students quite well, so that once you graduate, you have probably finished a minimal amount of reading, minimal amount of writing. You can provide publishable research. Your research is publishable in conferences. They let you participate in conferences. They let you work on campus.
So it's not a matter of money. You pay, you get a certificate or a degree.
Yes. Now, if I ask you, which one of the Iraqi universities provide an internship to students? There's no internship in most of the universities in Iraq, quote unquote. Once you start studying in there, you have a minimal amount and maximum amount of work. You can work in the bookstore, you can work in the library, you can work as a tutor if you get a graduate assistantship program, you can work in the writing center if your writing center's writing skills are up to their level of expectations. No. Here, we're talking about standards. And by standards, I'm talking about the flash drive that I just drew the analogy to. Once you start the graduate program, they create a party for everyone. So you go to the party, and the first thing that you receive is a flash drive that contains all curriculum, day by day, week by week, month by month, from the beginning to the end. So if you claim later, or if you complain later that I did not know, they will refer back to the flash drive because it contains everything. So you have to print it out, and you have and it's like a compilation of many departments. So every department chips in its share or its ratio of the details that the students they put it in the flash drive, and they give it to you for sake of credibility and transparency. So you need to go through the stacks and pile.
I think we have some internet connectivity issues.
Documents, previous dissertation.
Okay.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It's interrupting because of the internet connectivity, of course. Now, the idea is that, and this is another difference that we set from the Iraqi style of education or higher education, is that they give you a success example from the past years. So if you want to write a research, they offer you the topics that they demand kind of further exploration, and they tell you in what field you can focus on. They provide you one-on-one consultation between the professor and you. The professor is super friendly, and
This is
the
the point.
professor is also subject, is not only coming unidirectionally from the teachers or professors only. No, it is interchangeable. So you are eligible to provide castigating kind of criticism to the teachers and professors if they are not doing well. And I don't think I've encountered anybody who did not do well in their, professorial period. The idea also is that they have ratemyprofessor.com website that you can go and comment. It's a kind of like Facebook for professors. So you can write comments about every one of the professors on campus.
Very nice.
And say your opinion about it. So you need to develop a very kind of friendly, environment with students. Otherwise, you're going to face the music and end up being kicked out of school.
Very nice.
Another thing, in the United States, we do not have permanent job contract with the university. Every professor is subject to annual assessment.
Which certification, something about this.
And every semester they do assessment of this professors and see which one is doing well, which one needs to better their language teaching and to better their syllabi.
Yes.
In a sense, there is high level of transparency. So if I want to sum up the three major success elements of the education system in the United States, that the institutions are institutionalized. That means they are giving their decision-making role. They are not slaves under the hegemony of the Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education in there, they do not have something we call the Ministry of Education. They have committees that supervise and maintain the higher level of standards of federal government education standards. And they subject all the universities and private schools in there to these kind of policies. Second major element is the selectivity of very high level and cutting edge professors. Now, it always goes back to the origin of the problem. The professor is qualified. The professor has undergone years and years and hours of training, and he's
still
not
being supervised and checked.
Perfect. And the third is the solidity of the criteria of admissions. Nobody gets the regular admission without providing a very good, solid writing essays. Nobody gets the admission without providing very stable financial record. Now, the financial record is tied to the banking system in there.
So everything is controlled.
And also it is tied to insurance. So if your records show that you are a good driver, if the records show that you are non-alcoholic and you don't drink, if your records show that you have maintained very high hygiene standards and your health insurance is not indicating that there is any kind of like mental or psychological disorder.
Yes.
If your financial withdrawals from the bank showing that you are not withdrawing so much and you're not paying back so much, so not that so much, all of that is going to culminate in you being admitted at the university. So it is a kind of like web of intricacies that will lead you to get a very good admission at the university. And everything is sustainable. So I may add the expression of sustainability. So education sustainable system in there. They always sustain and formalize, improve the kind of education based on the three criteria aforementioned.
Very good. You've been teaching English online. It's not something new for you. But with this pandemic of coronavirus, it's been increasing. We've been doing online teaching, and some schools, especially private ones, started, and universities maybe now are obliged to do so. I don't know whether you are doing it now in university or not, but how do you see online teaching in Iraq, especially with English?
Well, I'm always that's a very important question, and I love it so much. This question is probably um, my favorite cup of tea when it comes to talking about distance learning and the difference between distance learning and face-to-face learning.
Hmm.
Uh, if if I track back my research in the MA degree, my research compilation of the papers that I've done in there in 2013 was on the significance of distance learning.
So it was on the point.
So my master degree is revolving around the significance of distance learning programs and how you design a very good, solid distance learning program. And that probably triggered the idea of doing online lessons in 2016, later on when I caught my breath after I came back to Iraq. The idea of the significance of distance learning training as opposed to face-to-face training is very high. I can tell you that there are so many official studies in the United States that show that there is no significant difference between face-to-face training and online training of English under certain conditions.
Of course.
Under certain conditions. There is no statistically significant difference between face-to-face learning and online learning of a second language under certain circumstances. And I can share some of the links here probably later on with you to have, because sometimes we go, well, in the Iraqi setting, we always try to be more opinionated than more evidenced kind of speaker. The face-to-face training is good, but it is not sustainable under the conditions of COVID-19 and the pandemic here in Iraq and around the world globally. So there's this spike of demand for online training. And I've been the online training platforms and see which one is compatible with your tendency and your approach and your teaching methodology. Because the next phase of education, guess what? Distance learning. The kind of classic concept of orthodox training of face-to-face is probably going to be invalidated soon due to the crises that we've come across in terms of education, in terms of lack of face-to-face contact with people. But that does not deny the fact that we have some problematic issues with internet connectivity, with maintaining good sustainable time of contact. The number of hours of contact are different from face-to-face to probably online. There's kind of like professor in front of you and virtually sense their voices. So there's this kind of dichotomy, if we may use this expression, between the face-to-face learning and distance learning. But the perception is leaning probably on the bell curve in Iraq. It is leaning positively to distance learning. Once people started to appreciate the importance of being isolated, started exploring more reading, they started exploring more distance learning courses. And I could see this surge of demand on my page. I get a tsunami of messages every day of how I can develop myself virtually without being in contact face-to-face with professors. So the idea of the advantage of or the benefit of distance learning is that you can be a couch potato and a good English learner at the same time. Whereas you have to position yourself in such a way, you have to corner yourself in a desk, and you have to always receive that kind of lecturing as a vessel from your professors. And the level of contact back to the professor is very minimal, whereas face-to-face is more interactive. There's more of body contact, eye contact. Presentation skills are going to evolve and develop.
This is maybe one of the drawbacks, maybe?
Probably, yes. But that does not mean that the drawbacks outweigh the benefits of virtual learning. So there is very high significance important. And as I said, there is no statistically significant difference proven on wide range studies to show that the difference between virtual learning and face-to-face learning are high to the level that face-to-face learning outweighs the virtual learning.
Okay.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Waleed, Khalid. I hope you finish your PhD, inshallah, very soon, or maybe in 2 years.
Wish the same for you, likely.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me.
You're on a good track, actually, to pursue your MA and your PhD.
Thank you.
You know, it's an eye-opening experience. It is fraught with challenges. It is fraught with failures. It is fraught with successes.
Yes.
And
especially
out of
here,
all of this formula, you're going to come up with as a different person. The kind of manifestation that you receive from being an MA or being an MA or PhD researcher is quite opening. And as I said, it's in the process. The beauty is in the process of going to get your MA or PhD.
Inshallah.
This road is fraught with challenges, but it is going to emancipate the inner successful person in you, and it's going to take you from where you are to where you want to be in a very positive trajectory.
Inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Amar, for this hospitality and for your sociable and
for your time.
More than welcome. At your service anytime.
Thank you. Thank you very much.